Erika Kirk pulls out of event with JD Vance after receiving very serious threats. Something disturbing just happened in American politics. And it happened quietly, without the fanfare of a congressional hearing or a major policy announcement. A local official pulled out of a public event with JD Vance. Not because of a scheduling conflict. Not because of a policy disagreement. Not because of any of the normal reasons that politicians cancel appearances. Because she received very serious threats. That's the phrase being used. Very serious threats. And those three words carry an enormous amount of weight in the current political environment. Erika Kirk is not a national figure. She's not a household name. She's a local official doing the kind of work that keeps communities running at the ground level. The kind of person who shows up to events, engages with constituents, and tries to represent the people who elected her. And she was scheduled to appear alongside Vice President JD Vance at a public event. Until the threats came. Let's be precise about what this means. Because the temptation in a story like this is to treat it as a one-off incident. An unfortunate anomaly, something to note and move past. It is not that. When a local official receives threats serious enough to pull out of a public event with the Vice President of the United States, that is a significant data point about the state of American political life right now. It tells you something about what is happening to the people who participate in democracy at the most basic level. The city council members, the county commissioners, the mayors of small towns, the local officials who go to ribbon cuttings and community meetings and yes, events with visiting vice presidents, because that's what their job requires. Those people are not protected by the security apparatus that surrounds national figures. They don't have secret service details. They don't have armored vehicles. They don't have advanced teams that sweep venues before they arrive. They have whatever local security exists. And their own judgment about when a threat is serious enough to change their plans. Erika Kirk made that judgment. She decided the threats were serious enough to pull out. And that decision tells you everything you need to know about how serious the threats were. Now let's talk about the broader context. Because this incident didn't happen in isolation. It happened in a political environment that has been growing more volatile and more dangerous for public officials at every level for years. The threats against elected officials have been escalating steadily. Against members of Congress, against state legislators, against local officials who make decisions about zoning or school curricula or public health that become flashpoints in the larger culture war. The data on this is not ambiguous. The threats are real, they are increasing, and they are affecting the behavior of the people who are targeted by them. Some officials hire additional security. Some change their routines. Some stop holding in-person town halls because the risk calculus no longer makes sense. And some, like Erika Kirk, pull out of public events because the threats against them are very serious. Each of those responses represents a small but real erosion of democratic participation. A narrowing of the space in which public officials can operate freely and safely. And when that erosion happens consistently, at scale, across the country, the cumulative effect on democratic governance is significant. Let's talk about the JD Vance dimension specifically. Because Vance is not just any political figure. He is the Vice President of the United States. And events featuring the Vice President carry a specific kind of intensity in the current political moment. His presence generates strong reactions. From supporters who are energized by his appearance. From opponents who see him as a symbol of a political direction they strongly oppose. That intensity, however legitimate the political disagreements that fuel it, creates an environment in which the threats against people who appear alongside him are more likely to be serious. That's not a statement about Vance's politics. It's a statement about the temperature of American political life right now. And the temperature is high enough that a local official looked at the threats she received and concluded that appearing at an event with the vice president wasn't worth the risk to her personal safety. That is a deeply troubling conclusion for her to have reached. And it raises questions that don't have comfortable answers. What does it mean for democratic governance when the vice president's public appearances become threatening enough to deter local officials from participating? What does it mean for the relationship between national politics and local governance when the two can no longer occupy the same public space without generating threats serious enough to change behavior? And what does it mean for the people who make threats like these when they succeed? When their intimidation campaign produces the result they were aiming for? Because that last question matters most. When threats work, they encourage more threats. When intimidation successfully removes someone from a public event, it teaches the people who made the threats that intimidation is an effective tool. And that lesson, learned and applied broadly, is corrosive to everything that democratic participation depends on. The right of citizens to engage with their government. The ability of officials to appear in public without fear. The basic expectation that political disagreement happens through speech and votes rather than through threats and intimidation. Erika Kirk pulled out of an event with JD Vance because she received very serious threats. That sentence should not be a normal sentence in American political life. But it is. And the fact that it is, the fact that this kind of story has become part of the regular rhythm of political news, is something that deserves more attention and more outrage than it typically receives. Because behind every story like this one is a real person. A local official who went into public service to do something good for their community. Who didn't sign up for threats against their personal safety. Who is now making decisions about their participation in public life based on the very real possibility that someone means them harm. That's what's happening in American democracy right now. Not just at the national level where security is robust and protections are significant, at the local level. Where the people doing the work of democracy are often doing it with very little protection and very little support. Erika Kirk made the decision that her safety mattered more than the appearance. That's not a failure of courage. That's a rational response to a real threat in a climate where those threats have consequences. The failure is the climate itself. And the climate is everyone's responsibility to address. Before more local officials make the same calculation. And the space for democratic participation gets a little smaller. Again, there's one more thing worth saying directly. The people who make these threats rarely face serious consequences. That's part of what makes the problem so persistent. The asymmetry between the cost of making a threat and the cost of receiving one is enormous. For the person making the threat, the risk is often minimal. Anonymous communications. Difficult to trace. Even when traced, prosecution is inconsistent and consequences are often light. For the person receiving the threat, the cost is immediate and real. Disrupted plans. Personal fear. The psychological weight of knowing that someone out there considers you a target. The practical calculations about where to go, what events to attend, what level of public visibility is safe. Erika Kirk absorbed all of those costs. The person or people who threatened her almost certainly absorbed very few. That asymmetry is not acceptable. And it won't change until the consequences for making serious threats against public officials become as real and as serious as the threats themselves. Until then, more officials will make the calculation that Kirk made. And American democracy will be smaller for it.